Hi everyone, welcome back to Rabbi's Reflection. I'm glad that you're joining with me today. We'll be continuing in our study of Kitchen Table Wisdom by Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen, and today studying the story All or Nothing. Stay with us as we read through the story and then offer some reflections. It is actually difficult to edit life, especially in regard to feelings. Not being open to anger or sadness usually means being unable to be open to love and joy. The emotions seem to operate with an all or nothing switch. I never cease to be impressed by the capacity of some ill people to live life more fully than most, to find more meaning and more depth, more awe in the ordinary. Perhaps it is because they have allowed the events of their lives to take them to some extraordinary highs and lows. Meeting people, there is a choice. One of the most challenging people I have treated was a woman with ovarian cancer. In her early 60s, she had lived an extraordinary life, meeting and making opportunities with zest. At one time, she had taken her 3 small children out of school and traveled alone with them around the world. A Zorba, the Greek kind of woman. The cancer and its treatment were more than a match for her exuberance, if not her spirit. At first, the chemotherapy had claimed only her hair, and she appeared in my office laughing, totally bald with huge exotic earrings. Ultimately, I appeared in her bedroom, when she was so weak she could barely open her eyes. Throughout this whole dreadful experience, she wore a Walkman playing what she called her chemotherapy music. At first she wore it only to her treatments. Later she wore it constantly. The cancer experience was unlike anything she had faced before. As she put it, at the start, I saw myself at the top of a ski run. It was a hellacious run. What I didn't realize was that I would have to make it on my knees. Stripped of her trust in her remarkable physical strength and vitality, she found an even greater trust in other, more hidden parts of herself, and she survived. About a year after the end of her treatment, when her hair and her weight and her laugh had returned, she threw a party for the people who had helped her in her healing. We gathered in her living room, almost 100 strong, to eat and drink and meet one another. Partway through the evening, she called for silence. Standing on a chair, she spoke of the past 2 years, her pain, her losses, her hopelessness and despair. We had each been there with her in some way, and she thanked us. With a twinkle in her eye, she held up a tape and reminded us of her chemotherapy music. She told us it was a single piece of music that she had listened to over and over all those months. She would play it for us now. With a little start, I realized that I had no idea what was on that tape. Dropping it into her hi-fi, she turned the volume high. After a few seconds of silence, a voice filled with emotion shouted out, "Praise God, brothers and sisters," and a blast of gospel music rocked the room. There was a moment of shock. Then 100 people, friends and neighbors, sons, daughters, beauticians, lovers, grocery delivery boys and taxi drivers, masseuses and yoga teachers, nurses, cooks, and house cleaners, began to dance. We danced for a long time. It was one of the great life celebrations I have ever experienced. As a physician, I was trained to occupy the middle ground, to participate in neither the disappointments nor the hopes of ill people, to be objective, to stand next to life. Often the price of such a stance is high. While I was still in medical school, I attended the retirement dinner of one of our faculty members, the recipient of numerous professional prizes. This doctor, well into his 70s, was internationally known and respected for his research and his contributions to medical science. People had come from all over the world to honor him. It was a memorable evening. The talk he gave was memorable too. With a characteristic brilliance, he summarized the progress of medical science in the 50 years since he had become a physician, integrating it into a stunning synthesis and pointing to the directions of future research. It was an intellectual tour de force, and he received a long-standing ovation. Later in the evening, a group of medical students went to speak to him and offer him our congratulations and admiration. He was gracious. One of our number asked him if he had any words for us now at the beginning of our careers, anything he thought we should know. He hesitated, but then he told us that despite his professional success and recognition, he felt he knew nothing more about life now than he had at the beginning, that he was no wiser. His face became withdrawn, even sad. "It has slipped through my fingers," he said. None of us understood what he meant. Talking about it afterwards, I attributed it to modesty. Some of the others wondered if he had at last become senile. Now, almost 35 years later, my heart goes out to him. In this week's story, Dr. Remen asks us what it means to live life fully. I think that's what she's trying to get at in her title, All or Nothing. We have two stories that she presents us with. One, the story of a patient of hers, and the other, from earlier in her life, when she interacted with a physician who was retiring, who is well esteemed and regarded in the field. And I think what she offers us in contrasting these two stories is to challenge us to think what it means to live life fully. If at first I gave you the choice of would you like to be someone who had ovarian cancer, or would you like to be a world-renowned physician, you would probably answer that you would like to be the world-renowned physician. Think of all the glory and the fame and the success, the money probably, that would give you a sense of having it all. And yet, to skip to the end of the story, we learn from this physician, when she and a few of her fellow colleagues from medical school approach him, that he feels like he hasn't known anything, that after all of this work and time, he is no more wiser. And perhaps that might just be a way of him being humble or, expressing his humility. But what I think Dr. Remen is trying to point out, especially in thinking in light of the other story, in the first story of the woman with ovarian cancer, is that perhaps this man didn't really experience life fully. It's the woman in her 60s, who has to suffer and go through ovarian cancer and miraculously or thankfully survives. She is the one who's able to live life the fullest. As Dr. Remen points out at the beginning of the story, in her interactions with people, she says it's the folks that are ill that are able to live life the fullest. They are able to come into contact and allow themselves to experience the great joys of life because they also are aware and are kind of confronted at a very regular basis, the anger and the sadness that they have. And I think there's something very wise to what she's offering us and telling us, that we can't edit life, as she says at the opening of the story. If we are not open to anger and sadness, that same spigot or that same opening of that pipe doesn't allow us to access the channels of love and joy in our life. And I think it's definitely challenging at first to hear, but I think she's onto something here. When we open up ourselves to all of those experiences, then we can fully feel all of the spectrum of those feelings. Because each of us have those. We don't have to necessarily, God forbid, go through cancer to learn about what it means to feel gratitude. I'm thinking of the image of that healing party that the woman throws a year after her chemotherapy has been successful. All of the people that have cared for her are gathered in the room, around 100, she says. And each of them, from their various different roles as doctor or nurse or beautician or delivery person, whoever it was, each person was there and provided for her in her time of need. And they all came together and celebrated her life and felt joy and excitement, which I could only imagine how wonderful that feels. And Dr. Remen points out, and I think it's really wise, that as a physician, and perhaps each of us, but as a physician, she stands in a middle ground. She stands next to life, right? There's a certain objectivity that is demanded or required of the work that she does. But that objectivity, unfortunately, doesn't allow her to fully experience life. And I think that's what she's trying to get at with the doctor, who is retiring at the end, where he says he really hasn't learned much. He's no more wiser. So my hope and my blessing for us this week as we reflect on this story is, what are the ways that we can allow ourselves to experience the full spectrum of life, all of the experiences, so that we can feel that we are living life to the fullest, both its joys and its sadnesses together, and that we'll feel that we've really lived a whole, and a complete life. Have a great day.